Human development is a continuous process. It involves psychological, emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual expansion. Healthy relationships allow for this process to unfold, sometimes in sync, sometimes at different paces, but always with mutual respect for each other's evolution. In contrast, narcissistic relationships are typically built on imbalance and stagnation. They function best when one person grows while the other remains central, superior, and unchallenged. So, when you begin to grow, whether that's through self-reflection, education, emotional regulation, or establishing independence, it inevitably confronts the narcissist with the one thing they are deeply threatened by: their own lack of growth. Stagnation, in psychological terms, is not simply a lack of motion. It's a resistance to development. For the narcissist, this resistance is often a protective mechanism. Emotional growth requires vulnerability, responsibility, and self-awareness, qualities that threaten the fragile ego structure that narcissism tries so hard to defend. Rather than evolve, the narcissist tends to invest heavily in defending a static self-permission, an identity that is rigid, idealized, and maintained through the control or diminishment of others. Your personal growth interrupts this system because it brings movement, and movement challenges control. Growth does not have to be loud to be threatening. Sometimes it's the quiet ways in which you begin to shift that unsettle the narcissist the most. You start saying no, you read more, you stop reacting with the same predictability. You begin to feel more peace within yourself and stop seeking their approval. These may appear to be small adjustments, but they send a loud message. You are no longer available for the same emotional dynamics that used to sustain the relationship. To a narcissist, this shift is not just uncomfortable, it's intolerable. Why? Because your development throws a mirror up to their stagnation. It shows them what is possible, what is healthy, and what they have long avoided confronting in themselves. This can lead to resentment, criticism, or even attempts to sabotage your progress. Not necessarily out of conscious malice, but out of psychological self-preservation. They are defending the territory of their unexamined self by attempting to diminish or discredit yours. This dynamic is often misunderstood. People ask, why can't they just be happy for me? Or why does my improvement make them act worse? The answer lies in how deeply a narcissistic identity is intertwined with superiority. In their world, someone else's growth is not seen as inspiring or neutral. It's viewed as competition or rejection. When you improve, they feel diminished. When you expand, they feel exposed. Your evolution is a threat because it challenges the hierarchy the narcissist has tried to preserve, one where they remain unchallenged and central. Furthermore, your growth requires space, reflection, and energy, resources that were previously directed toward maintaining the narcissist's emotional needs. When you redirect those toward yourself, they may accuse you of being distant, selfish, or changed. And they would be right, you have changed. But their interpretation of that change is filtered through a lens of insecurity. What they experience as abandonment is actually autonomy. What they see as betrayal is actually self-repression. The narcissist often cannot distinguish between someone growing away from dysfunction and someone intentionally trying to hurt them, because their worldview is deeply self-referential. Educationally, it's crucial to understand this, not to excuse the behavior, but to accurately identify it. Recognizing that your growth creates discomfort for someone stuck in denial allows you to navigate the situation with greater clarity and emotional distance. It reminds you that their negative reaction to your progress is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're moving beyond a dynamic that once kept you small. In some cases, your growth may prompt temporary change in the narcissist. They may mirror your behaviors, mimic your language, or even promise to grow themselves. But unless this change is internally motivated and sustained over time, it is usually a tactic to reestablish influence, not a genuine commitment to self-improvement. In the end, your growth is not a threat, it's your path forward. And though it may highlight someone else's unwillingness to grow, that is not your burden to carry. True development requires leaving behind not just outdated beliefs, but sometimes outdated relationships. Your progress is not a judgment on others, but a reflection of your increasing alignment with who you are meant to be. And if that growth reveals another stagnation, let that be a lesson, not a limitation. Authenticity, in psychological terms, refers to the alignment between one's inner experience and outward expression. It is the act of living in a way that is congruent with your values, emotions, needs, and identity. For individuals in relationships with narcissists, embracing authenticity is often the turning point, not only in reclaiming a sense of self, but also in disrupting a relationship dynamic that has depended on illusion and control. Narcissistic relationships are rarely built on genuine connection. Instead, they are often held together by performance, roles assigned, behaviors expected, and emotions suppressed. When one partner begins to live authentically, that entire structure begins to collapse because it can no longer rely on false narratives or emotional compliance to function. To understand this more deeply, it's helpful to examine the psychological nature of narcissism. The narcissist often operates from a false self, a carefully crafted persona designed to mask vulnerability, shame, and inadequacy. This false self is maintained through the manipulation of others, particularly those closest to them. In these dynamics, the narcissist tends to project an image of superiority, competence, or even victimhood, depending on what best secures attention, admiration, or control. In return, they often expect others to adopt complementary roles: the caretaker, the admirer, the rescuer, or even the scapegoat. These roles are not accidental. They are essential to the narcissist's psychological stability. Now, consider what happens when someone in this system begins to live authentically. That person stops participating in the performance. They begin expressing how they really feel. They challenge unspoken rules. They stop pretending to be okay when they're not. They ask questions. They tell the truth. This may seem like a natural and healthy evolution, but to the narcissist, it feels like a threat because authenticity brings reality into a space that has survived on illusion. When you begin to live more honestly, the narcissist is forced to confront the fact that the relationship is not as balanced or healthy as they have led themselves to believe. Your clarity reflects their distortion. Your emotional honesty reveals their emotional avoidance. Your self-awareness highlights their defensiveness. Your truth calls out their manipulation. In essence, your authenticity holds up a mirror, and what they see there often conflicts with the grandiose or victim-centered image they've created for themselves. This is one of the reasons why authentic individuals are often labeled as difficult, too sensitive, or unstable in these types of relationships. These labels serve a psychological function for the narcissist. They allow them to dismiss the truth without ever examining it. It's easier to discredit the authentic person than to dismantle the illusion they've spent so long constructing. It's important to note that the narcissist's rejection of your authenticity is not about you personally. It is about their inability to tolerate discomfort. Living authentically requires vulnerability, introspection, and the courage to acknowledge imperfection. For someone with a narcissistic defense structure, these things are too threatening. Their sense of identity is not strong enough to withstand criticism or emotional depth, so they retreat into defensiveness, denial, or attack. From an educational perspective, understanding this dynamic is critical. It explains why speaking your truth may provoke extreme reactions. It's not because you're doing something wrong, it's because you're disrupting a system that relies on you remaining silent, agreeable, or invisible. Your authenticity dismantles the roles they've placed upon you, and when those roles disappear, so does the narcissist's illusion of control. This is why personal growth in such relationships often leads to conflict or rupture. The more you become yourself, the more incompatible you become with a system that was never designed to support your wholeness. And while this process can be painful, it is also clarifying. It reveals which connections are rooted in mutual respect and which are rooted in manipulation and control. Stagnation, in psychological terms, is not simply a lack of motion, it's a resistance to development. For the narcissist, this resistance is often a protective mechanism. Emotional growth requires vulnerability, responsibility, and self-awarenesses, qualities that threaten the fragile ego structure that narcissism tries so hard to defend. Rather than evolve, the narcissist tends to invest heavily in defending a static self-permission, an identity that is rigid, idealized, and maintained through the control or diminishment of others. Your personal growth interrupts this system because it brings movement, and movement challenges control. Growth does not have to be loud to be threatening. Sometimes it's the quiet ways in which you begin to shift that unsettle the narcissist the most. You start saying no. You read more. You stop reacting with the same predictability. You begin to feel more peace within yourself and stop seeking their approval. These may appear to be small adjustments, but they send a loud message. You are no longer available for the same emotional dynamics that used to sustain the relationship.